I don't know if you've ever experienced that strange moment when life feels like it's collapsing quietly, not with noise, not with explosions, but with this slow, heavy silence. I always tell myself that emotions don't warn us before they break, but the truth is, sometimes the warning is there, and we just don't want to see it. I guess that's why, whenever I talk about what happened to me, I still feel that same tightness in my chest. Not from sadness anymore, at least not only from sadness, but from the memory of a version of myself who truly believed she was already broken for good. My name is Emily Carter, and until the night he appeared, I genuinely thought love was just a story other people experienced. Something distant, decorative, like the romantic scenes you scroll past because you can't imagine yourself inside them. I had convinced myself I wasn't someone meant for soft things. Not after what I'd been through. Not after Daniel. Daniel was my past, a long and complicated chapter filled with promises that melted the moment life demanded honesty. I used to think his presence was safety, that his voice was the soundtrack of my future, until the day I discovered how easy it had been for him to lie to me. It's funny, or maybe sad, how betrayal doesn't need a dramatic setting. It doesn't need thunder or storms. It just needs one message, one inconsistency, one moment of seeing the truth in someone's eyes. For me, it happened on a quiet Sunday morning. I remember the smell of coffee in the kitchen, the sound of my neighbor's dog barking outside, even the gentle sunlight slipping through the curtains. Everything felt normal, steady, peaceful. And yet, on that same morning, I opened Daniel's phone and read everything I never wanted to read. Messages from someone named Clara, full of secrets, full of intimacy I thought belonged to me. I don't know how long I stood there with the phone in my hand, but I remember feeling my body disappear from the inside. Like I was fading, becoming air, becoming nothing. Now, I'm not telling you this to make the story dramatic or heavy from the start. I'm telling you because you need to understand the exact point I was at emotionally when he walked into my life. You need to understand how empty I was, how tired, how quietly hopeless I'd become. Otherwise, you won't grasp why his arrival felt like something unreal, something too good to belong to real life. His name was Adrian Hayes. And the first time I saw him, he didn't look like a hero or a savior or anything close to what people imagine when they think of true love. He didn't glow or shine or demand attention. He was just there. Quiet, gentle, observant. Like someone who notices the world instead of rushing through it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me go back to the moment things truly began. After breaking up with Daniel, I decided to leave the apartment we shared and move into a smaller place on the other side of the city. Somewhere quieter, somewhere I wouldn't see his face in every corner. I remember packing my things while feeling like each object carried a piece of pain. The scarf he gave me. The mug we bought together. Even the books on my shelf felt tainted with the ghost of our shared past. It took me weeks to arrange my new home, not because it was complicated, but because I didn't want to make the space feel permanent. I didn't trust permanence anymore. So I left boxes in corners, kept walls bare, avoided buying anything new that could someday hurt to look at. And then there was the night everything changed, quietly, subtly, the way life likes to change when we're not expecting it. I had just returned home from work. The sky was dark, the air cold enough for my breath to fog. My hands were freezing, and I remember holding a grocery bag with eggs, bread, and one of those cheap frozen dinners you buy when you don't care what your dinner tastes like. I walked up the front steps of my building when I noticed someone sitting on the ground beside the door. He was leaning against the wall, elbows resting on his knees, a backpack beside him. Not a homeless man, not someone drunk, not someone dangerous. Just a stranger who looked exhausted. His dark hair was ruffled as if the wind had played with it. His jacket was covered lightly with dust. But what caught me off guard was his expression, tired, but gentle. Like someone who had walked too far and was trying to gather the strength to stand again. When his eyes lifted toward me, I felt a strange shift inside my chest. Not attraction. Not fear. Something in between. Something like recognition. "Are you okay?" I asked softly. He blinked a few times, as if surprised I'd spoken to him. Then he gave a small smile, the kind of smile that tries to be reassuring but fails because the person behind it is too worn out.
Yeah,
he said. Just resting. Resting. I repeated the word in my mind. He didn't look like someone resting. He looked like someone trying not to fall apart. Normally, I would have walked away. I wasn't the type to get involved with strangers, especially not when my heart still felt fractured. But there was something about him that felt familiar, even though I knew I'd never seen him before. "What's your name?" I found myself asking. He hesitated. "Adrian." I nodded, holding the grocery bag a little tighter. "Well, Adrian, it's freezing out here." He chuckled softly at that, and the sound was low, gentle, almost musical in the quiet night. I unlocked the door and glanced back at him. "Are you waiting for someone? Or, do you live here?" "No," he admitted quietly. "I don't live here. Yet." Yet. The word stayed stuck in my mind. I didn't ask more, because something in his tone told me he wouldn't say. And something in my chest told me it wasn't my place to push. I walked into the building, climbed the stairs, and entered my apartment, but the moment I closed the door, I leaned against it, the grocery bag still in my hand, my heart beating faster than it should. I didn't understand why a simple interaction with a stranger had hit me so deeply. It didn't make sense. But sometimes life introduces someone right when you least expect it, and that introduction doesn't always begin with a smile or a spark. Sometimes it begins with quiet curiosity. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the way he said "yet," as if destiny were something already written, as if he knew he'd return somehow. Days passed, and I didn't see him again. I told myself he had probably been passing through, maybe waiting for a ride, maybe lost. But deep down, I knew there was something more. The second time I saw him, it wasn't nighttime. It wasn't cold. It wasn't dramatic at all. I was leaving my building, late for work, hair messy, coffee spilled on my sleeve. I pushed open the front door, and almost ran into him. He was standing there, talking to my landlord, holding a clipboard and a pen. He looked cleaner this time, more rested, wearing a navy blue shirt and jeans that looked slightly worn but not dirty. The moment he saw me, his eyes softened, and he gave me that same gentle, tired smile. "Emily," he said, and hearing my name from his lips felt strangely comforting. I frowned. "How do you know my name?" He pointed to the clipboard. "Your landlord was just showing me the list of tenants. I'm moving in. Apartment 2B. My heart froze. "You're moving into the building?" He nodded.
Yeah,
I guess that "yet" came true faster than I expected. My landlord looked at me and laughed. "You two already know each other?" "Sort of," I murmured. Adrian didn't say more, just waited for the landlord to finish paperwork. But I noticed something about him, something subtle, something important. He carried a heaviness behind his eyes. The same heaviness I'd seen in my reflection countless times. Later that evening, I heard footsteps in the hallway and saw him carrying boxes into his new apartment. Normally, I would have avoided conversation. But something inside me pushed me forward. "Need help?" I asked. He gave me another small smile. "Only if you want to." I helped him carry a few things, books, clothes, a wooden box that looked old and meaningful. He never let me touch that one. He held it close, like something precious, something fragile. Inside his apartment, the space was empty except for a mattress on the floor and 2 chairs near the window. He placed the wooden box gently on the counter before finally sitting down. "Thank you," he said, his tone sincere. "No problem." I hesitated before adding, "So, where were you before you came here?" He looked at the window before answering. "Far. Farther than I wanted to be." That wasn't an answer. But somehow, it felt honest. Sometimes honesty doesn't require details. And that was how it began, our strange, quiet, gentle friendship. It didn't start with flirting or tension or romance. It started with conversations at odd hours, with shared silences, with moments where we opened up about things we'd never admitted to anyone else. I told him about Daniel, the betrayal, the heartbreak, the shame. He listened. And not the way people pretend to listen. He listened like someone who understood loss intimately. "I'm sorry," he said once, after I told him about the day everything fell apart. "No one should have to rebuild their emotions alone." I swallowed hard at that.
Yeah.
"Well, I'm trying." "You don't have to try alone," he said quietly. It wasn't a romantic line. It wasn't said with intention. It was simply kindness. And kindness, when you haven't felt it in a long time, hits you deeper than love. In return, Adrian shared pieces of his own past, never too much, never too little. He told me about his childhood, about his mother, about the way life had pulled him in directions he didn't choose. But there was one thing he never talked about, the reason he showed up exhausted and dust-covered that first night. I didn't push. I knew what it felt like to hide wounds behind silence. One evening, we sat outside the building, watching the sky turn orange as the sun set. I remember feeling peaceful. Peaceful in a way I hadn't felt in years. "You know," I said softly, "I don't really believe in sudden miracles. But sometimes I look at you and think, maybe some people really do enter our lives at the exact moment we need them." He didn't answer at first. Then he turned to me, his voice low. "Maybe it's not a miracle," he whispered. "Maybe it's just that broken people recognize each other. And sometimes they decide to heal together." That was the first moment I realized my feelings for him were changing. Not because he said something poetic, but because what he said felt true. Because I felt seen, not the way Daniel used to pretend to see me, but genuinely seen. But just as my heart began to trust again, life decided to test me. One night, I heard loud knocking on Adrian's door. I was in my kitchen, making tea, when the noise startled me. At first, I thought it was the landlord. But the voice on the other side wasn't familiar. "Adrian. Open the door." A woman's voice. I froze, my hand gripping the mug tightly. Fear, confusion, insecurity, all of it rushed back, flooding me with memories of Daniel and Clara. I tried to ignore it. I tried to breathe. But the knocking continued, harder now. I stepped into the hallway just in time to see Adrian open his door. The woman standing there had long blonde hair, a sharp gaze, and an expression full of anger and desperation. "We need to talk," she snapped. Adrian looked pale. "Not here, Lena," he whispered. "Lena." My stomach twisted. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but the ache in my chest felt too familiar. Before I could walk away, she saw me. "And who's she?" Lena asked harshly. Adrian stepped in front of me quickly, his voice firm. "She has nothing to do with this." Her eyes narrowed. "Unbelievable. You moved on already." Moved on. Those words hit me like a punch. And for the first time since I'd met him, I felt pain, not from my past, but from the possibility that my present wasn't what I thought it was. For a moment I couldn't move. The hallway felt colder, tighter, as if every sound had suddenly faded except for the echo of Lena's accusation. "You moved on already." That sentence wrapped around my chest like a rope, pulling me backward into memories I never wanted to revisit. Betrayal, suspicion, shame, they all returned at once, even though I kept telling myself this situation wasn't the same. Adrian turned toward me immediately, his expression tightening with worry. "Emily, wait." But I couldn't stay there. Not with that woman staring at me like I was a replacement. Not with my heart suddenly trembling the way it did when Daniel lied to me. I swallowed hard, stepped back, and said the only words I could manage. "It's fine, Adrian. Handle your things." Then I walked away. I didn't slam my door, but I closed it quickly, pressing my back against it as my heartbeat pounded against my ribs. I breathed slowly, trying to steady myself, telling my mind not to create stories before I knew the truth. But the truth had always been a complicated concept in my life. Men had always said one thing and meant another. And although Adrian never gave me a reason not to trust him, fears don't need reasons. They just need memories. I sat on the couch, staring at the blank wall in front of me. I told myself I wouldn't listen, I wouldn't eavesdrop. But then I heard voices through the thin hallway air, muffled, but loud enough. "Lena, this isn't the place," Adrian insisted. "I don't care," she snapped. "I had a right to know where you went. I told you it was over." "Over?" Her voice cracked with anger or maybe pain. "You disappeared, Adrian. You didn't just leave. You vanished. And now you're here, playing house with some new girl?" Silence. A long, heavy silence that made my stomach twist painfully. I closed my eyes and pressed my fingers against my temples. I didn't want this. I didn't want my chest to ache again. I didn't want to question every moment I had shared with him, every laugh, every conversation, every softness we had allowed to grow between us. But the echoes of betrayal never vanish fully, they just sleep until something wakes them. A few minutes later, the hallway went silent. I heard a door close, then footsteps approaching mine. A gentle knock followed, but I didn't move. "Emily?" Adrian's voice was low, careful. "Please, can we talk?" I kept my eyes on the floor, my breathing shallow. He knocked again, more softly this time. "Emily, I'm not going to leave until you open the door." I believed him. And for a reason I can't understand, that made my eyes sting. Slowly, I stood up and opened the door just a few inches. Adrian was there, hair messy like he'd been running his hands through it, his expression full of concern. "She's my ex," he said quickly, before I could speak. "But not the way you're thinking." I didn't respond. He exhaled shakily. "Can I come in?" I hesitated, but eventually opened the door wider. He stepped inside, looking around as if grounding himself before turning back to me. "First, I'm sorry you had to hear that," he said. "And second, I want you to know that nothing she said means anything about us." I crossed my arms instinctively, not in anger but in defense. "It's okay," I whispered. "You don't owe me explanations." He shook his head. "Actually, I do." I waited. Adrian sat on the edge of the couch, clasping his hands together. "Lena and I weren't together when I met you. We weren't even trying to fix anything. It was over long before that night you found me outside the building." His voice softened. "But she doesn't accept endings easily." I stayed quiet, listening to the tremor beneath his words. "I didn't leave her for someone else," he continued. "I left because staying was destroying me and her. We were hurting each other without even meaning to. And when I realized neither of us could heal in that relationship, I walked away." I could hear honesty in his voice, raw, unpolished honesty. But there was something else too. Something unsaid. "So why did you show up like that?" I finally asked. "That night you were sitting outside, exhausted." He swallowed hard, and I could see the way the memory weighed on him. "Because I left everything behind," he whispered. "Not just her. My town, my job, my friends. I left because I couldn't breathe there anymore. Every day felt like a repeat of the same mistakes, the same guilt, the same pain. I needed distance. I needed a new start." He looked up at me then, and for the first time since I'd met him, I saw tears in his eyes, but not falling, just held there, trembling. "And then you talked to me," he said softly. "You didn't know me. You didn't owe me anything. But you asked if I was okay. You noticed me, Emily. And I didn't realize how much I needed that." Something inside me cracked, not painfully, but gently, like a shell opening. I sat beside him. Not too close, not too far. "Why didn't you tell me about her earlier?" I asked. He hesitated. "Because I didn't want her to be part of what we were building. I didn't want her shadow in your heart." My throat tightened, and not from fear this time. From the weight of understanding. "I'm not mad," I whispered. "Just scared." "I know," he said. "I could see it in your eyes. He reached out slowly, not grabbing my hand, not assuming anything, just offering. I stared at his open palm for a moment before finally placing my hand in his. The warmth that spread through me wasn't romantic at first, it was grounding, stabilizing. It felt like the world stopping its heavy spinning just long enough for me to breathe again. We stayed like that for a long time. No words. No explanations. Just a moment where two damaged hearts decided to trust a little more. Over the next few days, things felt different, but in a good way. More open. More honest. When we talked, he shared more of his past. When I spoke, he listened with even more intention. And slowly, the tension that Lena had created began to fade. But she wasn't gone. Not yet. One afternoon, I found an envelope slipped under my door. Inside was a short note, written in quick, sharp handwriting. You don't know him like you think you do. People don't change just because they move. Be careful. L. My hands trembled as I read it. Not because I believed her, but because fear has a way of gripping the same wounds again and again, even after healing begins. I didn't want to hide it from Adrian, so that evening, I showed him the note. His expression immediately hardened, not with anger at me, but with frustration at the situation. I'm sorry, he said, rubbing his forehead. She shouldn't have involved you. What does she want? I asked. He sighed. Control. Closure. Maybe both. She wasn't always like this. We both changed in ways we weren't proud of. Then he took my hand again. But I'm not going back. Not to her. Not to that life. You're the first thing that's felt right in a long time. His voice cracked on the last words, and my heart softened completely. Still, the tension wasn't gone. Not yet. One evening, I came home and found both of them, Adrian and Lena, standing outside the building. They weren't yelling, but the conversation looked intense. When Adrian noticed me, he stepped away from her immediately, walking toward me with determination. Emily, he said gently, go inside. I'll explain everything in a minute. But before I could move, Lena stepped forward. You should know what you're getting into, she snapped. He runs away when things get hard. He doesn't fix anything, he just escapes. Adrian closed his eyes in frustration. Lena, stop. No, she insisted. She deserves to know the truth. I looked at Adrian, my chest tightening again. Is that true? He opened his eyes then, and there was no defensiveness, no anger, just honesty. It used to be, he admitted softly. I used to run from pain because I didn't know how to face it. But I'm not running now. Not from you. Not from this. If I were still that person, I wouldn't be here. Lena's expression faltered for the first time. Not out of victory. Out of realization. You really care about her, she whispered. Adrian didn't look at Lena. He looked at me. Only me. Yes. I do. My heart felt like it was both breaking and healing at the same time. Lena took a slow breath and finally stepped back. Then I hope you don't hurt each other like we did. She walked away, not dramatically, just quietly, the way people walk when they're finally letting go. After she disappeared around the corner, Adrian turned to me. I'm sorry all of this touched your life. It's okay, I said softly. Healing is messy. He smiled at that. A small, grateful smile. We went upstairs together, and for the first time since all of this began, I felt something powerful take root inside me. Not fear. Not doubt. But a strange warmth, hope. In the weeks that followed, we built something new. Something gentle. Something honest. We cooked together, shared stories late at night, helped each other rebuild trust piece by piece. I began decorating my apartment, finally letting myself believe in permanence again. He unpacked the last of his boxes, including the old wooden one he kept so preciously. One night, I finally asked him about it. What's inside? He hesitated before opening it. Inside were letters. Old photographs. Small keepsakes from a life that didn't exist anymore. My past, he whispered. Everything I thought defined me. Then he closed the box gently. But I'm building a new life now. One that doesn't fit in a box. I touched his arm softly. I'm glad you're here. He looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen before, an expression full of certainty. Emily, he said, you didn't just enter my life. You saved it. I felt tears fill my eyes, not from sadness, but from the realization that sometimes love really does arrive suddenly, quietly, like a warm breath on a cold night. And sometimes, it heals what we thought was permanently broken. We weren't perfect. Our pasts weren't perfect. But maybe that was exactly why we fit. Because healing isn't about erasing pain. It's about holding someone's hand while you learn to trust again. And Adrian never let go. Looking back now, I realize love didn't heal me all at once. It didn't arrive with fireworks or certainty. It came slowly, like sunrise through half-open curtains, warming the room one soft layer at a time. Adrian didn't fix my past, he simply held space for me to grow beyond it. And I learned that real love isn't loud. It's steady. It's patient. It whispers instead of shouting. If my story reaches someone who feels broken today, I hope you understand this, you are not beyond healing. Sometimes the person who changes everything appears quietly, just when your heart needs them most.